The universe chose you because your old life no longer fits. Say that line again in your mind and let its edges soften. Hear it as a metaphor, an energetic alignment rather than a decree. Hear it as an observation. Something in the field around you shifted, and the shape you had been wearing stopped matching the frequency you were moving toward. That mismatch is what woke you. It is not punishment. It is not failure. It is the very sign that change has come. At first, the change does not have a language. It arrives as an ache behind the ribs, an unnamed dissatisfaction that makes small, ordinary things feel like paper-thin costumes. The ache visits you at odd hours. It lingers when you laugh, and it settles into the space between tasks. You find that you are listening to your life in a new way. The soundtrack you once accepted now keeps hitting wrong notes. This is the beginning. It is the universe loosening seams so a new garment can be woven. You have been walking through a doorway you could not see until you were already through it. For a while, you may have thought you were simply tired. Later, you will name this as restlessness. At first, it shows up as a restlessness that feels almost ornamental, an itch you can distract with busyness. You feel the calendar, scroll the feed, take on more projects. But the itch persists. Then, small things start to fall away of their own accord. Your attention pulls like a magnet toward quieter things. You begin to notice the quality of silences, the way light lays against a wall in the late afternoon. You notice that a certain kind of conversation drains you, and that other conversations, strangers' confessions at a coffee shop, a fragment of an old song, feel like sustenance. This is not dramatic at first. It is not fireworks. It is a series of tiny misfits. Your shoes no longer align with the path you are stepping onto. The rituals you once repeated, work rhythms, weekend patterns, ways of relating, begin to make less sense. You do the same things and feel different. You say the same words and hear something else in them. It is as if your inner compass has shifted, but your outer map has not yet been redrawn. You may find the world offering you small tests. A job you once loved becomes a different climate. A friendship that used to feel nourishing grows thin. Activities that once brought joy now leave you drained. You do not have to choose to leave these things in a dramatic sweep. Often they loosen and exit on their own accord. People will comment that you are changing, and some may feel threatened by the unfamiliar version of you. Others will be quietly relieved to find in you a steadiness they can rest against. Neither reaction proves anything about your worth. They are simply signs that your frequency is different. There is grief in this process. Grief shows up because something essential is being released. You have to grieve the person you embodied to make room for who you are becoming.
That grief is not a defect, it is a clearing. Think of it as pruning. When a tree sheds branches in winter, it is not losing vitality, it is preparing its structure for the next cycle of growth. You will cry over small things you never would have expected. You will close doors to rooms in your life you once inhabited with ease. In those moments, treat yourself like someone waking from a fever. Be patient, be tender. There is no rush to accelerate the unclothing. As the old shape solves away, your senses begin to sharpen. This is what many call a sensory upgrade. It can arrive like a tuning fork finding resonance. You start to feel the edges of moods more clearly, yours and others. You notice subtle pulls in the environment. A room feels charged in ways that were invisible before. Synchronicity becomes less like surprise and more like a steady pattern. You might overhear a sentence at a bus stop that answers a question you were afraid to voice. A book falls into your hands on the exact page that speaks to an unresolved knot in your heart. You see repeating numbers, coins where you need them, names that appear again and again until you can no longer dismiss them as coincidence. Your intuition is not suddenly a superpower. It is more like the quiet return of an inner language. It has always been there, but it was drowned beneath habits, opinions, and the louder voices of obligation. Now it is raising its hand with small, practical nudges. A voice may whisper that a certain person is not safe for you, or that a project you are considering feels aligned. You may find yourself pausing before decisions and noticing an inner tone of coherence. Sometimes the signal comes as bodily knowing, a soft tug at the heart, a steadiness in the belly, a sense of ease in the throat. You learn to treat those signals as data, not infallible truth, but reliable information. This sensitivity has its own cost. It can make you more prone to overwhelm. The emotional weather patterns of people around you register like front pages you cannot unread. When the collective mood tightens, you feel it in your bones. That is not a failing. It is simply evidence of an open system learning to filter. You will develop ways to protect your bandwidth without closing. You will learn to exhale into practices that restore your center. Somatic grounding, walking in nature, deliberate pauses. These are not spiritual cliches here. They are practical stabilizers. You do not need to vanish from your life to stay present. You need to shape habits that conserve your clarity. In the middle of this sensory expansion, the old identities begin to unravel. The stories you built about yourself, about who you are, what you want, what you are allowed to be, loosen their grip. Maybe you see that the achievement that once defined you was never yours. It was someone else's expectation painted on your chest.
Maybe the role you played within your family or friend group no longer fits the contours of what you feel called to hold. You might notice that your earlier definitions of success no longer whisper to you. The unraveling is sometimes subtle, a dwindling enthusiasm, a skeptical blink when you rehearse your old lines. Sometimes it is fierce. Everything you once relied on collapses, leaving you standing in unfamiliar light. Regardless of the intensity, the unfolding is a process of calibration. Calibration is not linear, it is messy and circular. You will cycle through stages more than once. A pattern will reappear, only to be seen with fresh eyes. You will shed a belief and later find remnants of it surfacing in new circumstances. When this happens, greet it without shame. You are refining, not starting over. Think of it as tuning a delicate instrument. Sometimes you must turn the pegs several times before the note rings true. As you step through these cycles, your choices begin to change. The change is often quiet. You decline invitations you once accepted without thought. You create small pockets of time that protect your attention. You say no more frequently and with less rehearsal. People notice, not because you are trying to be different, but because your decisions now originate from a different place. Choices come with less friction. You are less tempted to justify yourself. You stop complicating the obvious. Clarity has a way of streamlining life. Another common marker is the feedback loop between your inner state and external reality. Earlier, you may have felt like life was something that happened to you. Circumstances, moods, and other people reacted to your decisions unpredictably. Over time, you begin to notice a rhythm. When you hold a steady, calm center, the outer world conspires to reflect that steadiness. This is not magic in the sense of guaranteed wishes. It is a practical observation about resonance. When you are aligned internally, your behavior changes. Your voice, the boundaries you set, the clarity of your requests, and the people around you respond differently. Doors that previously required force open with less strain. Opportunities appear that are closer to your refined values. But this responsiveness is subtle and cumulative. It often arrives as a gentle realignment rather than dramatic deliverance. You are not being asked to become an orchestrator of outcomes. You are becoming a field through which coherence naturally flows. That is the heart of what it means to anchor. Anchoring is not about telling others what to do. It is not a leadership by directive. It is a steady way of being that others unconsciously resonate with. Imagine standing in a crowded room where one person maintains a composed breath while the rest rush like waves. People will find themselves slowing down in the presence of that person. They might lean in, ask kinder questions, or simply exhale. Your role is similar. You are not superior for holding calmness. You are simply an available resource in a world that is learning to rebalance. Try to notice the small evidence of this in your day-to-day. A friend calls and tells you that being around you made them sleep better. A colleague seeks your perspective, not because you have the best answers, but because your presence offers a steadiness they can think from. A meeting that usually spirals into conflict instead settles into practical decisions after you speak. These are not claims of power. They are markers of influence that operate through reflection and coherence. They are gentle, ordinary ripples. There is a social cost to anchoring. Not everyone will appreciate the steadiness you bring. Some will interpret your change as withdrawal or judgment. Others will resist the mirror you hold up because your shift implicitly asks them to face their own misalignments.
This is not your fault, and it is not your responsibility to fix how others respond. You can remain compassionate without taking on their discomfort as evidence against yourself. Boundaries are not separation, they are clarity. You can be present with someone and still keep the edges of your own field intact. At the level of the collective, what many early awakeners experience is a sense of being slightly out of sync with the prevailing tempo until that tempo begins to change. You are awake before a larger transition, and that timing can feel lonely, but timing has a purpose. Being awake early allowed you to refine your instrument so you could be a clearer conduit when the collective pulse accelerated. You are not alone in this. There are others, scattered, unannounced, who share similar markers: restlessness, sensory openness, a sense of trimming away the unnecessary. Together, this diffuse group begins to create islands of coherence in the broader field. Recognizing this connection is not about forming tribes or claiming superiority. It is about empathy and shared attunement. You will encounter people who resonate with your pace and others who do not. Being awake does not require you to gather followers or build a movement. Often your role is quieter. You show up in relationships as someone who remembers steadiness, and that memory can remind someone else to breathe. Presence is the simplest kind of influence. Let us look at some concrete vignettes you may find recognizable. Imagine a woman named Mara who worked in marketing and derived much of her identity from being productive. Over months, she felt small, inexplicable tugs away from the metrics and toward more relational ways of measuring success. She did not quit her job, she redesigned how she worked, speaking up for slower timelines and reintroducing human-centered metrics. Her team, initially skeptical, found meetings more generative and less defensive. Her recalibration did not cause catastrophe, it gradually changed the atmosphere of her workplace.
Or consider Jamal, who noticed that family gatherings started to strain him in a way they never had. Conversations that used to be easy became energetic mines. He did not abandon his family. Instead, he learned to arrive later, stay for shorter periods, and practice intentional breathing when old scripts surfaced. Over time, his presence in those gatherings shifted. People listened more when he spoke and fell into fewer reactive patterns. His family did not change overnight, but the texture of their interactions softened. Then there was Anna, who kept seeing repeating numbers and phrases in dreams and waking life. At first, she dismissed them as coincidence. Eventually, she began jotting these patterns down and discovered a theme: messages about boundaries, rest, and how to steward attention. When she acted on these small nudges, her days began to feel less scattered. Opportunities that aligned with her new rhythm asked less effort and more discernment. These vignettes are not proof that awakenings are the same for everyone. They are evidence that change can be practical and modest, and that recalibration rarely looks like drama. Often it looks like rearrangement, shifts in how you spend attention, who you spend it with, and what counts as nourishment. There is an inner architecture to this process that can help you make sense of what you're experiencing. Think of it as layers of refinement. The first layer is restlessness, the initial signal your system is ready for reconfiguration. The second layer is detachment, the loosening of ties that no longer align with your emerging field. The third layer is sensory upgrade, heightened perception and synchronicity that provide new information. The fourth layer is shedding, an active releasing of identities, narratives, and habits that no longer fit. The fifth layer is integration, an ongoing reassembly where coherence begins to form. And beyond integration is activation, the moment when your internal coherence begins to have a consistent, subtle influence in the wider field. You may move through these layers at your own pace. Some people skate quickly from restlessness to integration. Others spend long seasons in the tender middle of shedding. There is no shame in the timetable. Each stage prepares the next. When you are in a shedding season, the work is not to hurry. It is to stay present and tender with the process. As you shed, expect your language to change. Not everything requires explanation. You will discover quieter vocabularies, words like enough, steady, and clear. You will feel less compelled to narrate your life at every turn. In their place, presence begins to speak louder. You may show up less in social media and more in actual rooms. You may find your curiosity returning to simple pleasures, cooking a meal with attention, walking without a podcast, listening to the weather as an inner metaphor. These are not regressions. They are refinements.
With refinement often comes the recalibration of relationships. Old roles fall away. The friend who once called for the same reasons stops connecting in the same ways. Romantic partnerships can be tested as people find their frequencies diverging. Again, you are not instructed to leave relationships. Instead, you are invited to meet them honestly. Conversations that once kept things afloat may now require new frameworks. Some relationships will evolve naturally. Others will reach a compassionate end. Both outcomes are valid and human. One of the most confusing parts of this journey is the intermittent return of doubt. You may wonder if you are inventing the whole thing,
if your sensitivity has become a dramatization of normal human restlessness. Doubt is a healthy companion if you treat it as data. It helps you differentiate between fad and depth. Ask what the doubt is trying to protect you from. Often it is fear masquerading as prudence. Listen to it. Check your feet on the floor. Move forward with tiny experiments rather than sweeping commitments. The smallest acts of alignment, saying no to one meeting, choosing one book, taking a short walk, become tests you can learn from. There will also be moments of luminous clarity, brief glimpses where everything sings in harmony. In those times, decisions become obvious. You will feel a simplicity that is almost shocking. Hold those moments as memory anchors. They are not promises of perpetual ease, but they are evidence of the directionality of your journey. Save them. Return to them when grit returns. Along the way, you may also develop rituals that help you mark the thresholds you have crossed. Rituals do not need to be elaborate. They can be a short morning sentence to set intention, a private pause before meals, or a tiny altar of objects that remind you of what matters. Rituals are ways of signaling to yourself that your inner life is being taken seriously. They are not performance, they are infrastructure. I want to offer one small practical suggestion right now, just a moment that asks nothing dramatic of you. If this is resonating, take a breath and place a hand on your chest. Feel the rhythm there. In that simple place, quietly name one way the old life has loosened for you. It can be a feeling, a small reordering, a clear no you made recently. If you want to share this as a gentle alignment ritual, write in the comments, "I was awakened before the transition." Only do this if it feels meaningful. This is not about proof, it is about recognition. A single sentence can help you place your feet in the present field. After that small pause, continue with me. There is more to say about the sensory landscape you are navigating. As your perception sharpens, the world begins to send you feedback that is more immediate and specific. Instead of vague nudges, you may start to receive practical pointers: which conversations to enter, which projects to decline, which habits to reframe.
These pointers are rarely loud. They favor quiet clarity over dramatic revelation. They come as impressions and alignments. They ask you to notice and to test. Acting on them is not a leap of faith so much as a series of small, resonant choices. One tangible example: you might be considering a new course of study or a professional pivot. The impulse arrives not as a thunderous command, but as a consistent noticing. Books show up, casual conversations steer that way, small doors appear. By responding with small experiments, an introductory course, an informational interview, a weekend workshop, you allow the field to tell you whether the resonance sustains itself. If it does, the path gradually becomes clear. If it does not, you have learned without needing to burn everything down. You will also begin to notice your thresholds. Some environments will drain you instantly, others will replenish you slowly. Family dynamics, office cultures, social media formats, each will have a signature on your system. Learning where to invest your energy is not selfish, it is stewardship. Energy is the currency of alignment. Spend it where the yield is in coherence, not collapse. Another practical marker is the way your decisions begin to feel like faithful companions rather than heavy obligations. A decision aligned with your refined field will carry a note of ease. Even when the choice is difficult or risky in conventional terms, the internal tone will have a clarity that reduces the performance anxiety around it. That does not mean it will be pleasant all the time. It does mean that your nervous system will find ways to regulate because the decision is coherent with your inner map. At the same time, the field will test you with friction. Old patterns often resist change because they are familiar. That resistance can feel like public failure, missed deadlines, awkward conversations, a collapse in routine. When friction appears, use it as data. It is not condemnation. It is an invitation to refine the mechanism rather than abandon it. You might adjust the pace, gather support, or reclaim rest. The goal is steady refinement, not perfection. As you progress, you may begin to experience moments where the world seems unusually responsive to your internal shifts. A tiny decision, choosing to arrive at a meeting with calm intent, might change the tenor of the hour. A conversation where you hold presence may shift an argument toward understanding. These are the early signs of activation, but they are still subtle and intermittent. They are not proof that you are above the fray. They are proof that your coherence matters. There is a danger in misreading these early ripples as confirmation that you have all the answers. Keep humility close. Coherence does not equal omniscience, it equals faithful presence. When you hold yourself accountable to clarity and kindness, your influence tends to be constructive.
When you hold your clarity as an excuse for dismissiveness or avoidance, it becomes harm. The heart of activation is not efficacy, it is fidelity to presence. You may wonder about the social structures around you, workplaces, friendships, institutions, and how they will respond to your shift. Institutions are slow-moving organisms. They will incorporate elements of your recalibration if those elements increase function and cohesion. Sometimes your presence will catalyze small changes. Meetings that used to devolve into confusion become focused. Policies are reconsidered to prioritize sustainable pace. A team learns to hold space for rest. Other times, you will collide with inertia. That collision does not indicate failure. It indicates that you are at an edge, and edges demand choices about how to proceed. What is most useful in those moments is curiosity coupled with careful action. Ask questions, measure small experiments, seek allies rather than converting skeptics. Gentle, consistent presence tends to create more lasting ripples than dramatic gestures. Be willing to be the person who keeps showing up with calm steadiness amidst the noise. Over time, presence becomes persuasive. There is also a deeper ethical commitment embedded in this work. It asks you to steward your inner life so that you are not an accidental transmitter of confusion. This stewardship is not perfectionism, it is responsibility. When the field around you is turbulent, your clarity can be a lighthouse, not a command center. Lighthouses do not control the weather. They simply give a steady point of reference. People make their own decisions near that light. As you become more practiced in holding your center, you will notice the quality of your words changing. Language becomes crisp. You speak less to perform and more to translate presence into practical clarity. Your conversations will begin to include more reflective questions and fewer predigested judgments. You will learn to ask, what does this moment actually need, rather than stating what you believe the moment requires. These habits are small, but they are how coherence grows outwardly. Before we move further into how this activation deepens within the collective, pause here for a moment and observe where you are in the arc I have described. Are you in the first ache of restlessness? Are you in the messy middle of shedding? Or are you gathering moments of integration and seeing evidence of your influence in everyday life? There is no right answer. There is only where you are today. In the next section, we will explore the communal dimension of this shift, how fields overlap, how early awakeners unconsciously anchor one another, and what it means to be a stabilizing presence within a larger, sometimes chaotic environment. We will look at how you can hold boundaries that are kind and effective, and its simple markers that show your activation is moving from private inner work to gentle collective resonance.
For now, rest in the recognition that your experience is meaningful and that this loosening, this reweaving, is exactly how the world makes space for a different frequency. When fields overlap, things begin to hum in a way you can feel. Two people who have been quietly tuning their instruments don't need to announce themselves to notice each other. They simply recognize a kind of breathing. You will have moments like this. A neighbor pauses on their walk because they felt calmer after passing you. A member of your team thanks you for listening differently. A stranger confesses something in a line at the market and leaves lighter than they arrived. These are not dramatic conversions. They are small recognitions of resonance, two frequencies briefly aligning and sustaining one another. This is how collective change accrues, not as a single trumpet call, but as 1,000 patient harmonizations. When you are early in the arc, you may feel like a single lamp in a wide dark. Over time, as more lamps come online, the dark feels less dense, and the edges of pathways become visible. You will meet other early awakeners in places you don't expect, in a late-night conversation, in a quiet online forum, at a planting workshop, or in the posture of someone returning a grocery cart. These encounters can be brief and still be meaningful. They act like checkpoints, reminders that your sensitivity is not an error, but part of a distributed tendency toward coherence. One important practice is to notice how you share your field. Sharing does not mean preaching. It means carrying a steady energy into the rooms you inhabit. You might imagine your presence as a gently warmed cup set on a table. People can choose to take a sip. If someone draws close to that cup and seems to find steadiness, you have done your work. If not, that is also okay. You cannot pour what you do not have. The discipline is to tend your own hearth so that it is available when others are ready.
Holding boundaries in this season is practical and nuanced. Boundaries are not walls that separate you from people. They are windows with clear frames. You learn to say things that are both honest and contained. I don't have the capacity for that right now. I'm stepping back to rest, not to judge. Or I can hold a conversation, but I won't join the rehash. These phrases are tools, not tests. Use them without apology when needed. Notice that the first time you name a boundary, you may feel a spike of guilt or performance anxiety. Those feelings are not evidence you are wrong. They are remnants of old operating systems that believed availability equals worth. As you persist, the guilt softens. You find that being clear is kinder to you and others. There is skill in the small arts of recalibration. Develop a few short scripts for common interactions.
For example, if a workplace meeting turns into a draining territory of blame, you might offer, "Let's pause and list what we can control in the next 24 hours. If a family lunch slides into reactivity, try, "I'm here because I love you. I won't engage in that pattern today." These sentences are simple, and their power lies in consistency. People learn to expect steadiness from you, not because you exert authority, but because you persist in comporting yourself from a place of clarified attention. Cultivate practices that replenish you between interactions. Creative outlets, movement, a brief pause with a cup of tea, journaling, or a walk without a phone are tiny restorations of bandwidth. A resilient field is one that is nourished regularly. When you notice depletion, honor it quickly. Think of energy as a ledger. Small deposits compound. A walk in the afternoon, a short nap, a moment of silence before responding. These are deposits that preserve your capacity to be an anchor. There are ethical habits that sustain an awakened presence. Keep curiosity close to conviction. Before diagnosing another person's motives, ask what they are actually saying and what they might be trying to protect. Offer questions rather than verdicts. Replace preaching with translation. Help others translate their reactive energy into recognizable needs. When someone is angry, ask, "What are you trying to hold that feels threatened?" More often than not, beneath their expression is a practical request for safety, respect, or acknowledgement. Translational generosity moves the moment from moralizing into practical repair. Remember also to watch for patterns of overextension. The kind of person who becomes an anchor can easily become a rescuer. Helping is noble, but it becomes harmful when it prevents another person's growth or exhausts you to the point of collapse. Ask yourself, am I helping someone carry a weight they are ready to carry themselves? Am I enabling avoidance? Choose support that empowers rather than circumvents growth. Small, consistent boundaries with generous curiosity make for healthier ecosystems than heroic interventions. As the collective pulse shifts, you will see practical markers that activation is moving from private coherence to gentle public influence. Notice these signs as they arrive. Conversations that used to escalate now cool after you speak. Decisions that needed energy suddenly require less persuasion. People begin to use language you have used, the same shorthand for steadiness, for saying no with dignity, for naming what matters. These are not badges of spiritual rank. They are signs that resonance is contagious in measured doses. Influence travels by replication. Someone experiences your steadiness, finds it useful, and copies it in their context. There are also institutional markers. Workplaces may start experimenting with slower timelines, more generous break policies, or clearer decision-making structures, because those shifts increase retention and reduce conflict. Neighborhood groups may form quiet practices, a community garden that fosters regular presence, a local space for neighbors to check in. These changes are incremental. They prefer slow accretion over dramatic overhaul, because ecosystems that change slowly tend to preserve what functions well while letting go of what does not. As activation increases, your relationship with uncertainty will alter. Things that used to feel like crises will reveal themselves as invitations to recalibrate. You will find that some choices that seemed urgent are actually seasonal tests. When choices are urgent, ask for time, even a small amount, to sense your body and make a coherent move. A coherent decision may still be difficult. It will simply have a different texture. This texture is one of integrity. It does not require frenetic justification. It has a tone of acceptance and practical courage. One of the most practical and underappreciated signs of integration is a change in how you use timelines. Previously, you may have been impulsively focused on immediate results, measuring success in hours and days.
As you integrate, you begin to think in cycles. You allow projects to breathe. You recognize that some seeds take seasons. Patience becomes a disciplined faculty rather than a passive weight. You will learn to steward timelines with curiosity, set experiments, short feedback loops, and reasonable markers of success. When a path aligns, it will show sustained signs. When it doesn't, that becomes data for a different experiment. Alongside these systemic changes, keep an eye on relational microdynamics. Friend groups may sort themselves naturally into those who resonate with your new pace and those who do not. That sorting is not a moral verdict. It is logistical clarity. You will feel lighter when surrounded by people who can tolerate your steadiness, and heavier when you are with those who are triggered by it. Both are valid. You will sometimes need to hold both kinds of relationships, some that replenish and others that teach tender patience. Learn to allocate time accordingly. When activation becomes consistent, you will notice a softening of the drama that once fueled decision-making. Decisions begin to be motivated by coherence rather than fear. When fear-driven reactions arise, treat them as information rather than instruction. Ask what the fear is protecting you from and whether the protection is still necessary. Over time, the system learns to choose actions that are congruent with the new field, rather than reactive reflexes carved into old rhythms. There will be seasons of test. The field will present you with opportunities to practice steadiness in more public, consequential ways. A crisis at work may require you to hold a room of people in panic.
A family emergency may test your ability to be present without becoming brittle. These are not proofs of transcendence, they are laboratories. Approach them with humility and logistical preparation. Get enough rest beforehand, have a support person you can debrief with, and keep a few simple practices to return to your center. After such events, honor the recovery that is required. Activation is not an endless supply, it must be replenished. You will also face the temptation to weaponize coherence as a way of controlling outcomes. This is a significant ethical pitfall. Coherence should not become a tool to manage others' behavior or to immunize yourself against discomfort. Influence that comes from compassion and curiosity tends to be life-enhancing. Influence that cloaks control often masks fear. Keep checking your intentions. If you notice a flicker of pleasure in being right or a desire to orchestrate, pause and ask where that impulse comes from. The more honest you are with yourself about these moments, the less likely they are to calcify into patterns that harm your field. Community and allyship matter. Seek out others who are also practicing steadiness. These are not necessarily people who have the same path as yours, but they tend to be those who value presence, clarity, and kindness. A circle of accountability is not about performance pressure, it is about reflection. In such a circle, you can test difficult conversations, practice boundaries, and receive honest feedback about when your presence helped and when it wounded. Choose people who will both witness your growth and challenge your blind spots with compassion. As you navigate these terrains, keep returning to the small, practical rituals that anchor you. Rituals do three things. They mark thresholds, they convert intention into habit, and they create memory anchors that you can return to when life accelerates. A ritual might be a morning sentence of intention, a 5-minute breath before meals, a short nightly inventory where you note 3 small moments where you acted with clarity or rest. These practices are not spiritual vanity, they are infrastructure. They help you avoid the extremes of heroism and collapse. If you want a simple ritual to mark activation, something quiet and portable, consider this short practice. In a place where you can be still for 60 seconds, place a hand over your heart and another on your lower belly. Breathe slowly 3 times, letting the belly expand and the shoulders soften. On the 3rd exhale, name one commitment out loud to yourself. Keep it small. I choose to rest when I need it. I will listen before advising. Or I will say no when my capacity is full. Let the sentence sit in your body for a moment. This is not a vow written in iron. It is a tender promise you can revise as you learn. The point is to create a somatic bridge between your intention and your day.
You may be wondering how to translate this activation into sustained life changes without the drama of an overhaul. Begin with micro-commitments. Choose one area of your life to experiment with for 30 days. It could be how you show up in weekly meetings, how you manage your email, or how you engage at family dinners, whether you had to re-engage someone, and review weekly. The discipline of micro-experiments prevents impulsive burn-it-down moves and creates real data about what aligns. There will be moments when your inner map and the outer world seem to disagree sharply. In such moments,
Resist the temptation to externalize the mismatch as a cosmic indictment. Instead, use it as an opportunity to refine the map. Ask, is my inner compass miscalibrated, or is the environment not yet ready to hold this frequency? The answer may be both. If it is the former, curiosity and practice will help recalibrate you. If it is the latter, patience and strategic engagement will allow the field to catch up without you having to collapse for it. One subtle danger is the magnetic temptation to always be on, to feel obliged to be the steady resource for everyone around you. This is a harmful expectation. Activation does not oblige continuous availability. It calls for wise distribution of attention. You will be most effective when you care for yourself consistently and set reasonable rhythms of accessibility. Consider making defined times when you are present for others and other times when you are not. Protect those non-negotiables as you would protect a work deadline or a family appointment. Part of activation is learning to celebrate small wins. When you notice your presence changed a tense conversation, take a moment to acknowledge it and perhaps jot it down. These small wins are the loam in which your confidence grows. They are not trophies to collect in order to claim superiority. They are evidence that coherence has practical effects. Keep them as gentle fuel. As you continue to consolidate your practice, your life will likely rearrange in ways that surprise you. Some roles will find a new shape, others will dim. Opportunities will present themselves differently, sometimes asking for your attention, sometimes receding because they no longer resonate. Let discernment be your primary tool. Discernment is the companion of integration. It is the capacity to notice both internal tone and external feedback, and to move accordingly. Near the edge of activation, you may choose to formalize a practice of checking in with yourself before big moves. Create a short checklist that helps you discern alignment. Does this choice feel coherent in the body? Does it serve a clear value rather than a reaction? Who will be affected and how? What small experiment can I run to test this before committing?
These questions slow down the impulse to act and allow the field to show more of itself. Now, toward a small intentional close. Activation does not ask for grand gestures. It asks for fidelity. It asks you to be steady, present, and honest. It asks you to carry your life with less performance and more clarity. It asks you to treat your sensitivity as information and your boundaries as compassion. Before we finish, I will offer an optional, simple declaration you can speak quietly to yourself as a way of sealing alignment. This is not a spell, it is a somatic reminder. If it resonates, say it aloud once, or hold it silently and let it rest in your chest. I am aligned with my true frequency. I will steward my presence with care. I will choose coherence over drama. Use whichever words feel honest. The point is to make a short statement that you can return to when the world tugs at your edges. If you feel moved to continue this practice and want more glimpses into how to steady yourself within changing fields, consider subscribing for more conversations like this. The invitation is simple. Return when you need companionship and bring what you learn back into your life in small, earnest ways. Take one last breath now. Feel the place in your chest where recognition lives. Remember, the loosening you have experienced was not a failure of will, it was space being made. The new contours of your life are still forming, and you are learning to move through them with integrity. You were not awakened to escape, you were awakened to anchor. The universe chose you because your old life no longer fits.